Imagine standing at the edge of everything you have ever known. Below you is your home, every city, every ocean, every life story, reduced to a fragile blue glow hanging in absolute darkness. Ahead of you lies nothing but silence, danger, and the unknown. No rescue, no second chance. Would you still step forward? In July 1969, 3 men did exactly that. Inside a cramped spacecraft, no larger than a small car, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins were suspended between Earth and the Moon, balanced between survival and catastrophe. The mission was called Apollo 11, a name that would soon become a symbol of human courage, intelligence, and ambition. But before it became history, it was a gamble unlike anything humanity had ever attempted. To understand how extraordinary Apollo 11 truly was, we must go back decades earlier, to a world divided by fear and rivalry. After World War II, 2 superpowers emerged, locked in a silent struggle for dominance: the United States and the Soviet Union. Their competition was not only political or military, it was ideological. Each side wanted to prove that its system represented the future of humanity. Space became the ultimate stage. In 1957, the Soviet Union shocked the world by launching Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. For the first time in history, a human-made object orbited Earth. The message was clear: the future had begun, and America was behind. 4 years later, that shock turned into alarm when Yuri Gagarin became the first human to travel into space. While the world celebrated, the United States faced a harsh reality. It was losing the race. President John F. Kennedy understood that catching up was not enough. America needed a goal so bold, so ambitious, that it would redefine the competition entirely. In 1961, he announced that the United States would land a man on the moon and bring him back safely before the decade was over. At the time, this promise bordered on fantasy. The technology barely existed. Rockets failed regularly. Computers filled entire rooms yet had less power than a modern phone. NASA was given less than 10 years to achieve what no civilization had ever done. The challenge was enormous. Engineers were not simply building a rocket. They were inventing an entirely new world of technology from scratch. Life support systems, navigation computers, heat shields, guidance software, and materials capable of surviving both the vacuum of space and the inferno of re-entry. Every component had to work perfectly, because failure meant death. That danger became horrifyingly real in 1967. During a routine ground test, a fire erupted inside the Apollo 1 command module, killing astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee in seconds. The tragedy shook NASA to its core. It exposed deadly flaws in design and procedure, and it forced the agency to confront a brutal truth. The price of error in space was absolute. From that moment on, everything changed. Systems were redesigned, safety protocols rewritten. Every bolt, wire, and valve was treated as if human lives depended on it, because they did. By 1969, NASA was ready to make its boldest attempt. On the morning of July 16th, the Saturn V rocket stood on the launch pad in Florida, taller than a 30-story building and more powerful than any machine ever created. When its engines ignited, the ground shook. Fire and thunder filled the sky. Millions watched live as the rocket slowly rose, carrying 3 men and the hopes of an entire planet into space. Once in orbit, the real complexity began. The spacecraft had to perform a precise sequence of maneuvers, separating stages, turning in space, docking with the lunar module. There was no margin for error. After leaving Earth's gravity behind, the planet shrank into a distant blue sphere, floating in darkness. For the first time, humanity saw its home as it truly was: small, fragile, and alone. 3 days later, Apollo 11 entered lunar orbit. Michael Collins remained aboard the command module, circling the moon alone, while Armstrong and Aldrin transferred into the lunar module, Eagle. When the two spacecraft separated, Collins knew that if something went wrong, he might be forced to return to Earth alone. The descent to the lunar surface was the most dangerous phase of the mission, and almost everything went wrong. Alarms sounded as the onboard computer became overloaded. Fuel levels dropped faster than expected. Below them, the landing site was covered in rocks large enough to tip the fragile module over. With seconds of fuel remaining, Neil Armstrong took manual control, guiding Eagle across the surface in search of a safe place to land. Mission control in Houston fell silent. Then came the words that changed history. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Hours later, as cameras transmitted grainy images back to Earth, Neil Armstrong descended the ladder and placed his boot on the lunar surface. An estimated 650 million people watched live, the largest broadcast in human history. When he spoke the words, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," they echoed far beyond the moon. Buzz Aldrin soon joined him. Together, they walked across a world untouched for billions of years, planted a flag, conducted experiments, and collected lunar samples. Above them, Michael Collins orbited in silence, playing his vital role in bringing them home. Returning was just as dangerous as arriving. If the ascent engine failed, Armstrong and Aldrin would be stranded forever. The White House had even prepared a speech in case they never returned. But once again, the systems held. The crew reunited, left a lunar orbit, and headed back toward Earth. On July 24, 1969, Apollo 11 splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean. The mission was over, but its impact was eternal. Almost immediately, doubt followed triumph. Conspiracy theories claimed the landing was staged, but the evidence remains overwhelming. Lunar rocks studied worldwide, instruments still functioning on the moon, and modern satellites that have photographed the landing sites themselves. Apollo 11 was not just an American victory. No, it was a human one. It proved that with knowledge, cooperation, and courage, humanity could overcome the impossible. More than 50 years later, that footprint on the moon still reminds us that limits are not walls, but horizons waiting to be crossed. And now, here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. If humanity could reach the moon with 1960s technology, what do you believe we are capable of today? If this story inspired you, subscribe to the channel for more journeys into the moments that shaped our world. Because the next giant leap always begins with the courage to imagine it.